the United Methodist Church, both here in Silver Lake and in the Great Plains Conference and all around the world. We recently completed the Great Plains Annual Conference session, where there were lay, that's church members, and clergy members from all 1,040 churches in Kansas and Nebraska gathered together. I am so grateful to Carolyn Steele for attending as our delegate. She was faithfully present and has many good things to report. Tania Sudduth was also present for the conference representing campus ministries. And if you're interested in lots and lots of information, you may read about the annual conference session on the Great Plains website. But for this morning, Carolyn and I will share some highlights. Carolyn.
Well, good morning. I'm Carolyn Steele, and I am very honored to be your voting delegate to the Great Plains Conference. Your leadership and nomination committee voted me for that, and this is the first time I've ever been to this type of conference, so everything was new and different for me as far as a religious conference. I've been to lots of other conferences for schools and 4-H, Indian and that kind of thing. And I do want to thank Jack for being my chauffeur in Wichita. I know Wichita the least of any of the cities in Kansas, but I know it better, and he took his own time and donated a lot of energy to help me out with that. So thank him for that. I was amazed to find out that the Great Plains Conference, and by the way, I love that name, Great Plains. I've always told my students we are not the Midwest, we are the Great Plains. It's a stronger name, I think. And so I love the name of the conference to begin with. And in the Great Plains Conference, we merged Nebraska and Kansas together. And there's over 1,000 Methodist churches in Kansas and Nebraska. And the interesting part is they're little churches. And now Topeka, of course, has 14 larger churches, but the Topeka district alone has 70 churches, and that's the 8 surrounding counties here. But they passed out a pamphlet that listed all 1,000 churches, and there's places like, familiar to us, Elmont, Silver Lake, Rossville, and small churches. We have a church called Bucks Grove in the Topeka district. Camp Creek, Pole Creek. So they're tiny congregations. But then on page 21 in the workbook, there's a whole page of outreach programs that these small churches all go together and sponsor. And to me, that's really awesome. It shows the cooperation of these small congregations all going together to sponsor. This is Kansas and Nebraska, 5 Methodist universities, along with 10 campus ministries, 9 health and retirement facilities, 7 ministries for the poor, 5 African and overseas missions, 13 ethnic ministries, 6 campgrounds, 17 other missions for if my math is correct, a total of 62 outreach programs. And to me, that was just overwhelming that these small congregations can go together and do all of that outreach work. And a rather new program that's near and dear to my heart is Silver Lake is one of 177 churches that have started the ministry partnership with public schools. So, you public school teachers out there and coaches, you can apply for grants through the conference and receive money for classroom and school projects. So you keep that in mind. And like I said, we're one of the churches that got on board early with that, so I'm proud of that for Silver Lake. Now, down to the work. We voted on 12 delegates and 3 alternates to go to the national, and I'm going to call it regional conference. They call it jurisdictional, but that's a big mouthful. So, and I think more people relate with regional. A lot of voting, and the folks that you might be familiar with that were voted on, and I did vote for these folks on your behalf. Oliver Green from Topeka, he's from Asbury Mount Olive Church in Central Topeka. Randall Hodgkinson is with First Methodist near the Capitol building in Topeka. And then Wesley Gately. Oliver Green he listed his age as 60 plus in the bio, and he'll be a good representative. He's been very active for many years with Asbury Mount Olive in Topeka. Randall Hodgkins, these guys didn't want to list their ages, which I thought was interesting. Randall Hodgkins listed his age as somewhere between 45 and 50. And then Wesley Gately, now he did list his age. He's 19, and he's from Wamego. And very dynamic young man. And we did get to hear very short campaign speeches by all 49 of the candidates. In fact, we had 4 that didn't register in advance, so actually like 53 that were up for delegates to your regional and national conference. Okay, here's the report that's going to be near and dear to my husband's heart, finances. The financial report, since we are a new conference, we're only a year old, which again made it exciting for me to go that we're just really a brand new conference. Since we are a brand new conference, and this was from the director of finance, his name is Gary Beach, they were audited 4 times in 1 year. And he said they came out to the penny all 4 times. And they started putting a lot of numbers on charts on a huge screen up on the stage, and another director came up and he said, I can see you delegates are glazing over out there. And he said, I do want you to know that the director and the board members of finance are all CPAs, and in some cases they're ministers and they're CPAs. And so we're in good hands, I think, as far as finance for the conference. And that made me feel good. And as far as money, that hopefully is comforting to a lot of people. The organization of the conference was very impressive to me. We live up to our name, Methodist. It was highly organized, even though we were working with 2,400 delegates and in a huge conference center, Century 2. It was highly organized. Every debate, every speech, and every vote was timed. And they kept everyone on time. One of my stories I like to tell is when the candidates were coming up giving their little campaign speeches, they kept them to 2 minutes. They would give them the cutoff sign. If they didn't cut off, upon seeing the sign, somebody went up and hugged them. So they did. They kept it to 2 minutes, pretty much. So that made the conference really move along smoothly. Another procedure that impressed me was Bishop Scott Jones was in charge of the big general sessions. And when it came to the business part of the meetings and the voting, at the very beginning, some of the delegates started applauding, and he cut them off immediately. And the first time I thought, oh, wow, that's rude, you know. But the more I sat in on the business sessions and the voting, that really kept the conference moving along quickly. And also, when you allow applause during voting or a business session, that charges the atmosphere. And in some cases, if it gets out of hand, it supercharges the atmosphere. So Bishop Scott Jones really does a good job moving the business and voting along, and he kept it very civil and cordial. And like I've mentioned before, I've been to other conferences, and sometimes other conferences, especially when it comes to debate and voting on controversial issues, gets kind of edgy. But the Methodist Conference, they kept it very calm, peaceful, and cordial. Technology, this was very impressive. I was glad to be able to go to the very first conference where they used handheld voting devices. They look like a remote control for your television, and you would key in a 4-digit number for the candidate you were voting for, and then they would shoot it on a huge screen on stage, and so that way you could keep track of voting, and of course instant feedback. And it was kind of like a golf leaderboard. You could kind of see the candidates going up the leaderboard, so to speak. And so that was very impressive. As far as on the floor, I think they had 8 microphones on the floor and probably 4 on the stage. We had closed circuit cameras, so that when someone stepped to a microphone to speak, you saw them on screen, as well as every word they said was printed, because they had voice recognition computer software. So that made taking notes much easier and keeping track of names and that kind of thing. And it even translated it into English if someone spoke in Spanish. So that was pretty awesome as far as the technology was very impressive. Inspiring moments. Every morning at 8:30 we had worship, which was early since we meet at 10 here in Silver Lake. Again, very inspiring when you're drawing from 2 states. There's a huge talent pool out there, and choirs were wonderful. Instrumental groups were fantastic. We had excellent speakers. We had youth worship. We had Spanish worship. We had a baptism of a female minister's new baby. We had communion. Communion service one morning. The worship service that probably impressed me the most was the Hispanic worship from Garden City, and they would speak in English and Spanish both, and so the software really got to work out with the Hispanic group from Garden City, and they played the mariachi type music, tambourines and that kind of thing. Very impressive group. And then one evening they had the Methodist ordination, and as you probably heard me earlier in the month say, I did get to attend my cousin's Catholic ordination in Kansas City this year, and then I was really thrilled to get to go to the Methodist ordination because I've never been to one, and that'll probably never happen in my lifetime again, to go to 2 ordinations in 1 month's time. And again, very impressive ceremony. They ordained 7 new ministers and then commissioned 12 folks working towards their ordination for the future. So again, the music very impressive and inspiring. The ceremony was absolutely divine, and great speakers, and we had liturgical dancers also, young ladies from the Wichita area. So I'm really grateful that I got to attend such an honorable event. You're in very good hands as far as leaders throughout your district, the Topeka district, and the Great Plains Conference. I was highly impressed with the confidence level and the caring level of all the speakers and delegates at the conference. And one day at lunch, I was already seated, and a lady came in and sat beside me, and she looked at my name tag, and she said, "You're from Silver Lake." And it was the Rossville minister. So that was fun. I think I remember her just by pure coincidence. I sat with her at lunch one day, compare Rossville and Silver Lake congregations. Next year, be prepared, the Great Plains Conference will be in Topeka. So those 2,400 Methodists will be in your post them. And my last piece of information is the most important. And that is Pastor Janet has been reappointed for the year 2016 for our church here in Silver Lake. Thank you again for allowing me to be your delegate.
Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn has told you most all of what you might ever need or want to know, but I just have a few more things to add. One of the ways that we were enriched in those worship times that Carolyn talked about were messages from Bishop Bruce O. from the Dakotas and Minnesota Conference. If you think Great Plains is big with Kansas and Nebraska, how about 2 Dakota states and Minnesota as one conference? We also had a teacher named Stephanie Hickson, who is one of the directors of the Just Peace organization, and together they helped us to look at ways to address things like conflict as peacemakers, and not to stand in the way of what God is doing. And to remember that as people of the church, we are really a revival and a movement, and not simply a church institution. And so Bishop O challenged us with a question saying, is the Lord among us or not? And he reminded us to pay attention to the questions, for it is in the questions that God seeks us. In each of those worship services, the congregation called the conference was invited to share in mission offerings. It's always amazing to me how many and diverse ministries, as Carolyn mentioned, that we together support as the conference. Those particular offerings this year went to Haiti, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe, which are our mission partnerships, to the United Methodist Global AIDS Fund, to the Oklahoma Indian Missionary Conference, the Lydia Patterson Institute, and the Zimbabwe Episcopal Area, and, of course, Youth Service Fund. So throughout the conference, we are always reminded of our United Methodist Church's mission. That mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And it is based on the scripture reading that Kathy read for us today. We heard what they fondly call State of the Church messages from both the conference lay leader and from Bishop Jones that focused on how are we doing with our mission? What are our priorities? And as we look at that priority of making disciples, we have to take a look back in order to look forward. Bishop Jones lifted up for us that in the year 2013 to 2014 across the conference, sadly we declined in some areas. We declined in the number of professions of faith, people who are making a new faith commitment. We declined in our average worship attendance, the number of people that are normally in worship on a Sunday morning. And we even declined in participation in small group experiences in the church. But we're also increasing, and we celebrated the increase of the number of people in hands-on mission. As a conference, we increased as well in the percent that we paid on our mission shares, that's what we used to call apportionments, by 1% from 86 to 87%. Of course, our goal is 95 to 100%, but every time we have an increase, that's a cause for celebration. Around the conference, we also have the goal of developing new churches. The goal is 20 new churches by the year 2020. We celebrated the pastors and students who are participating in creating those new church congregations. In order to do that, of course, it takes leadership, and another one of the priorities is to recruit and train clergy. The conference together was encouraged to embrace what is called a culture of call. for each of us as local churches, individual churches, to have a role in reaching out to people who may have gifts and graces to lead congregations. You never know who you may influence as you see young people, middle-aged people, old people who are seeking to be leaders and following their call. So all of us have a role in that encouragement. We have been following the Bridges to the Future campaign for years in our conference. We have now reached a total of $8.7 million. Those have gone and continue to go to Hispanic ministries, campus ministries, new churches, and camps. And a real joy is that all of our camps, how many did you say we had? 16? A whole bunch of them between the two states. All of them have had an increase in the number of campers participating this summer. That's a great celebration. And while we think about those new churches that are starting, we also celebrate with those churches that have a great long history. And there are 5 churches in the conference who are celebrating their 150th anniversary this year. So churches are encouraged to say yes to new ideas, to look at resources the conference has to offer. And a new line on the website is called a toolbox that has all kinds of ideas for mission and ministry, and also a link that churches can share their best practices together via that website. As Carolyn mentioned, a large part of our time was involved in electing the delegates to General and Jurisdictional Conference. That will happen next year in 2016, so it is always the year before at annual conference when we need to select those people. We also affirmed a lot of leaders in ministry, and in addition to the school partnership that Carolyn lifted up, we also welcomed and met 33 interns in ministry who are working this summer in various places, from new church starts to our Hispanic ministry churches. Some are going around leading vacation Bible school in churches, and others are serving as pastoral interns or apprentices, shadowing a pastor in a church for the summer. And Countryside happens to have one of those interns this summer as well. Well, as many as are coming in, unfortunately there are more going out. We had 42 retirements of clergy this year. That's what happens when the baby boomer generation reaches retirement age. So with 7 new elders coming in and 42 retiring, clearly we need to work on that culture of call. We also learned that the average age, get this, the average age of pastors right now is 56. That means that 50% of all the pastors in the Great Plains Conference will retire in the next 10 years. That's an amazing number. For those of you who are in United Methodist Women, or those of you who love United Methodist Women, you'll be happy to know that the Great Plains United Methodist Women are leaders in our area. They were the first in our jurisdiction, which is what Carolyn calls regional area, in their mission giving, and second in the entire nation. That's a big hooray. And those of you who know Janae Green, who came and shared a program with our UMW not too long ago, she received the Conference United Methodist Women Award this year. Whenever you gather together as a conference, it's a time for us to lift up those ideas and dreams and visions and concerns that we all have together. And in addition to electing the delegates to prepare for General Conference, we also raised up petitions to go to General Conference as well. All kinds of subjects, everything from how bishops are elected to where the conference money should be invested, to changes regarding our understanding and practice of homosexuality. We voted to petition the General Conference to change the Book of Discipline. That's our policy, doctrine, guidebook of the United Methodist Church, to remove language which says that homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching, to permit clergy to participate in same-sex marriage ceremonies, and to permit annual conferences to ordain gay clergy as elders. This petition will now go to the General Conference, and those who have been elected as our delegates will be working with that, as will there be petitions from all kinds of other conferences across the United States. It's so great to be able to celebrate mission and ministry together as the conference. As Carolyn lifted up to you, the lists of ministries go on and on and on. Things like Imagine No Malaria, which we are fond of here, in supporting the conference has raised $623,000 for that. And this year, United Methodist Committee on Relief is celebrating its 75th anniversary. Throughout those 75 years, over $9 million has been raised throughout the conference to assist those persons with disaster relief and recovery. It is very encouraging to be at annual conference and to see the action of young and old alike, to see our upcoming lay and clergy leaders who are young adults. We have a very bright future. There was a youth delegation that probably had 30 youth in it, and all the ministries that are lifted up by our church. So this morning we want to conclude sharing about the people of the United Methodist Church by lifting up a video of the ministries that were shared with us at annual conference. In the words of the speaker, Stephanie Hickson, she leaves us with this thought as you watch the video. You are the message, the gospel. How we show up matters. Let's watch.
St. Luke Methodist Church.